Well, here we are back safely from our trip to Ecuador. We were 5 weeks there. We had a great time, but now we're back at Rio Grande Bible Institute, and we just finished the second week of the fall semester, and things are going great. We have students from 30 different Spanish-speaking countries in our school here,
including China and Cuba.
Yes, the first student from China, I believe, we've ever had studying in Spanish. So it's really exciting.
In Ecuador, John was able to teach probably 4 hours a day.
Oh yeah.
The whole time we were there, in different churches on the coast and in the mountains. So stay tuned for lots of pictures. The first week of June, we flew to the port city of Ecuador, Guayaquil, which is the land of huge banana plantations and the immense Guayas River. We did this trip because John had an invitation from the Quechua pastors to teach an intensive course in Quechua regarding what the Bible says about the Holy Spirit. What an opportunity it turned out to be.
Sinispaka manachaya peroning inyuka espiritu kang manchurasha kang kambak shongo rumishina kairato pero Jesus de Frishpaka aji shongo tukonga y chaiwan kambak bueno Dios pa espiritu tenyukan sigma kachanga mana solamente majan pero moso causaita con Santo Espiritu Manta.
We were hosted by dear friends in Guayaquil, different pastors. Well, we stayed with one pastor and his family, and just enjoyed the fellowship and the friendship that they showed us. They live on a street where it's just so typical of Guayaquil. Everything is gray. The word Guayaquil begins with G, and so does the color gray. And it seems like a lot of the city is gray because most everything is made out of cement. The first church that John taught at was a pretty large church that had just recently been completed. The building had recently been completed. And we just had such wonderful fellowship there with not only the pastors, but quite a few of the congregation who came from 3 to 6 every afternoon. And then there was another group that was kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing where one of the women in that group said, "Hey, I have another group of young people that meet at another church across the town, and would you come over there and we can teach over there from 7 to 9. So you can tell there was a lot of thirst, a lot of hunger, a good response to the Word. It was fun to see that church still completing in the basement, the Sunday school rooms. It's just a vibrant, growing church. And of course, not without growing pains, but it was wonderful to be there. Then we went on to another church in Guayaquil, the pastor of which is the best friend of the pastor we were staying with. So he heard about it, and John went over there, and well, both of us went. John taught from 3 to 6 there also, only usually it ended up being more like 3 to 7. The pastor and his wife, if you think of it, when you come to this picture, you can pray for his health. He is not well, and I'm not sure what problem he has physically, but he's certainly a wonderful pastor for that group of people. There's a lot of young people in that congregation, including this couple, and I include their picture because this is a Spanish-speaking young lady married to a Quechua-speaking young man. And they both are working together to create an eBay business. So it's just very interesting to see how the culture of the Quechua people is changing due to many factors, but the greatest of which, in my opinion, seems to be the language. The young people, this couple, they are educated business people, and they both speak Spanish, though his heart language is probably Quechua, but he's very fluent in Spanish as well. After the conference at that church, we went on to Iglesia Evangélica Quechua La Trinidad, which is another group of Quechua people who have migrated from the high mountains down to the city to find work, which is kind of the trend of much of the world. We had a great conference there, a lot of young people. The adults, and who were, well, probably most of them with teenagers themselves now, mostly speak Quechua, but the teenagers speak Spanish. So you can see there's a difficult challenge that they're facing with that Spanish and Quechua gap. After that conference, the pastor of that church was our chauffeur up to the high mountains. You can imagine, if you've ever loved mountains, when we saw this site of Chimborazo, we were just thrilled to see it again, to be there again. So you can imagine that summit up there is quite something. So as we went from sea level up to that mountain valley, we were just enthralled with everything, with the paramo grass growing up there on the high altiplano, and the flowers, and even bluebonnets grow up there. It's amazing. This is the valley where we lived for so many years to translate the Bible, and it was an emotional sight to see that lake again. This picture was taken at probably 15,000 feet, looking down to the valley that's 11,000. Eucalyptus trees are growing everywhere up there. And that road in the top of the picture is the Pan American Highway that goes from the middle of the country to Cuenca, and of course on further through Ecuador, but many people now in America have heard of the city of Cuenca because a lot of Americans are going there to retire. Across the highway is a big building that looks like a factory, and it is. It's a place where they grow orchids. And if you have bought an orchid recently at Kroger or H-E-B or a major grocery store, it might have come from there. It's an amazingly huge orchid production factory. So yes, we went on up to the mountains, and just by chance, supposedly ran into Manuel Mendoza and his wife, who he is the young man at the time he was young. Now he's almost ready to retire after working 40 years for World Vision. But when we lived in Colta, in that village, he was the one who typed the manuscript for the Quechua Bible. Before he finished, he typed the Quechua Bible, complete Old Testament and New Testament, 5 times. We had to buy a new letter A for the typewriter because those were the days of just having a typewriter, and many Quechua words end with A, and we had to get a new letter A. Anyway, it was just amazing to see this couple who are still in our hearts even after all these years. Everything was, it was kind of like stepping back into time, stepping back in time. Life still goes on like it did when we were there 35 and 40 years ago. And way before that, the women spinning thread from big chunks of wool from their own sheep, carrying big, huge burdens of all kinds of grain and grass to feed the guinea pigs. And look at this. This is a bluebonnet bush that is growing seed pods that are used to make chocho. Maybe you've never had that to eat, but it's quite a process to make. But oh my goodness, it's sure good. Up there you have to have something warm. This is a poncho that one of the ladies in this household loaned John. He explained that he would not need to take it back to the Rio Grande Valley where we live because it never gets cold enough or cool enough to put that on where we live now, but it sure was wonderful up there. Even to put on top of his whatever those kind of jackets are. You would know the name if I could remember. And there's good old Chimborazo in the background. This is about 12,000, a little over 12,000 feet in the yard of the pastor we stayed with. Here's his driveway, which has been paved with tile, adoquines in Spanish. It's very steep, and it's a beautiful place. This is the family. Raphael is in the red poncho on the couch, and he's one of the main translators for the Bible, and also has been pastoring ever since we finished working on the Bible. His youngest daughter, over there on the left, is studying to be a dentist. So I thought I would just put that in these slides because she's doing a great job, and she has quite a few people who are already pleased with what she's done, including this man who is her neighbor and her uncle. And he's just, it's amazing that he would smile that much for a picture, because they're taught not to smile for pictures. But he was sure happy with his new teeth. This is the pastor's wife. She raised this pigeon from a little tiny, newly hatched creature to the large pigeon that it is today, and has stayed right there at their house with no cage, not being contained in any way. It just stays right there for 3 years. You can tell that this pigeon considers this lady its mother. Everyone takes their share of doing the chores around the farm, around the place, including Elena, who is standing by me. She is a lab tech, but she is also interested in getting the Quechua hymn book put into music. This picture was taken in our living room in Edinburgh, Texas, where one of the student helpers and one of the winter volunteers and myself are all working on putting those words into musical notes. It's quite a project, 300 hymns, and we have 200 of them done. I transferred that picture and that scenario up to the living room in this house at this pastor, where this pastor hosted us. We had electricity, which is a relatively new thing in that house, but there was no heat, so it was cold, but it was wonderful to work with Elena on the project side by side instead of from Texas to Ecuador distance. Here's the pastor helping. His part that particular day was doing laundry and hanging it out in the yard to dry. It takes about 2 days to dry up there, but you have to start somewhere. There's beauty all around, even though there's also harsh living conditions. We had all kinds of marvelous good fruits and vegetables, and even some gluten-free cookies that one of the students found in the store in town and brought to us. The church that this pastor pastors is up another 1,000 feet into the hills, the mountains behind his home, and we had such a great conference up there. It was cold, but it was wonderful. It's also called La Trinidad. It's kind of the mother church of the one you saw, the picture of the church in Guayaquil. They all wanted to have a group picture when we finished that particular session, which was on a Saturday morning. If you can imagine getting that many people out on a Saturday morning to really study the Bible, it was wonderful. On the right side, when you go out the church door, there's a big hill with cattle, and on the left side there's fields of quinoa growing everywhere. It was beautiful. It was almost ready to harvest. We were headed that rainy noon to the kitchen after this session because it was so cold. The only warm place was the kitchen, and there were people in there cooking. Oh boy, it was good too. It was wonderful. Quinoa soup. So we didn't suffer at all. We had wonderful, good soup, often with potatoes, sometimes with quinoa. Raphael wanted to take us from that church building over to the first house that he built, way up there. There's no electricity, no running water, but finally they had to move down to the house where we were staying because it was just too hard to keep living up there. This is the pastor's father-in-law. This man, he's 90. Well, there was a debate about how old he is, but 90-something. And he built this house. John is standing there at the gate. And this man built that house many years ago, and the wall is still standing, the gates are still standing. It's an amazing structure. It just doesn't have the roof on it any longer. And he can no longer get up there because of the steep trail, the steep place where it is. You can see the wall up at the top of that hill. And the trail goes up from where I'm standing to the right. So we went up there often just to pray up there and to get our exercise for the day. It accomplished both purposes. Oh, it was very steep. You can see the steepness. That red field in the middle is quinoa. This is alfalfa. It's just, and this was the dry season, so it's an amazingly lush mountain valley right there at 12,000 feet. Eucalyptus everywhere. More friends up there at that house, and then in addition to that church of the pastor that hosted us in the mountains, we also had another group that met in a place called Kalpi. They were so interested. It's just, anyone who is a teacher knows how much fun it is to teach people who are interested and responsive. The young lady on the far left I don't know if she came to know the Lord for the first time during that week there, but she definitely announced that this was the first time she really understood salvation. So that was fun to have that response too. She now said, I want you to send me every piece of information you can send me about the school where you teach in Texas, so that maybe I could come there to study the Bible and come back and be a missionary in my own country. So we'll see if that pans out, but that's how excited she was. We had impromptu prayer meetings up there in that little room that was provided for us in that building. And many of the pastors had Bibles that looked like this. They were just hungry for teaching and to learn. So we had to leave those beautiful mountains all too soon. And go back to Guayaquil, back down. That's quite a trip to go from that altitude back down to sea level and back home to Texas. You can pray that the ideas, the teaching, the interaction, face to face, person to person, will bear fruit, that the Lord will use it to bring many to himself. Thanks so much for your support, for your prayers, for your encouragement, for being with us all these years. It's amazing to go back and see what's happening after a whole lifetime of service. Thank you again. We love you. Bye for now.